Good morning, professor and classmates. Today we're going to be talking about comparative political systems regarding Cuba, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. And we are Ana Fernanda, Santiago Medina, Ignacio Rodriguez, and Gabriela Pajolo. So this is the outline of our presentation. First, we're going to give you an introduction of the countries. Then we're going to describe the type of government, going into democracy and authoritarianism, and then the quality of democracy, and lastly, a conclusion of our analysis. Introduction of our countries regarding the independence, the capital city, the population, and the territory and the GDP per capita.
Bolivia, known as el Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia, became independent the 6th of August of 1825 from the Spanish crown. Sucre is the capital according to the constitution and where the judicial power is exercised. In La Paz, there is the seat of the government where the executive and legislative power are exercised. Bolivia has a population of 10,351,118 inhabitants, according to the 2012 census. The country has 1,098,581 square kilometers of sovereign territory. The GDP per capita, according to the 2018 estimations, is $3,548.59.
Cuba is a country that declared its independence from the Spanish crown the 20th of May of 1902, after the independence war that left important heroes such as José Martí or Antonio Maceo. Its capital city is La Habana, located on the island's north coast. It has a population of 11,326,616 people for the year 2020, and its territory comprises 110,860 square kilometers. Apart from the Cuban island, it also has the sovereignty of La Isla de la Juventud and several minor archipelagos. For the year 2018, the GDP per capita was of $8,821.82 US.
Ecuador's independence is the 10th of August, and they have independence from Spain in 1809. The capital city of Ecuador is Quito in the province of Pichincha. Ecuador has a population of 17.08 million people and a territory that expands throughout 283,560 kilometers squared. It has frontiers with Peru in the south and Colombia in the north. It has a GDP per capita of $6,344.87 US, slightly smaller than Cuba and Peru, but a larger GDP per capita than Bolivia.
Peru got its independence the 28th of July of 1821, after being a Spanish colony. Its capital city is Lima. Its population is 31,914,989, and its country comparison to the world is the 44th. The territory in total is 1,285,216 square kilometers, and the GDP per capita is $13,500 in 2017, and its country comparison to the world is the 120th. So, according to the Pepe-Norris theory, we're going to describe the type of government of each country.
Bolivia is constituted in a unitary social state of plurinational community law, free, independent, sovereign, democratic, intercultural, decentralized, and with autonomies, according to Article 1 of the Constitution. The state's institution of Bolivia, founded around democracy and the separation of powers, implies a republican form of government. The proclamation of Bolivia as a plurinational state is in consideration of the nearly 40 indigenous ethnic groups that inhabit the territory. Bolivia has a presidential system, where the president is head of the state and head of the government. Currently, the president of Bolivia is Yanine Áñez, until the election is held. At the same time, the state powers are divided in 4 governing bodies. The executive body is composed by the president, head of the state and the government, the vice president, and the ministers of state. The president and vice president are elected by universal suffrage and have a term of office of 5 years. Both can be re-elected only once. Legislative body. The National Legislative Assembly is chaired by the Vice President of the state. It is made up of two chambers, the Chambers of Senators and the Chamber of Deputies. Judicial body, formed by the Supreme Court of Justice, courts, and the Council of the Magistracy. Justice is imparted in two types of jurisdictions, ordinary and indigenous ordinary peasant. Constitutional justice is exercised by the Constitutional Court. Electoral body is composed of the Supreme Electoral Court, departmental courts, and electoral notaries. Bolivia has a participatory, representative, and community democracy. At the same time, has a multi-party system with parties of different political colors, several of them organized by peasant, indigenous movements, among others. Among the most recognized, we can highlight MAS, Movimiento Socialismo Party, that governed the country from 2006 to 2019 with Evo Morales as president. Comunidad Cristiana, Partido Demócrata Cristiano, Bolivia dice no, Movimiento Nacionalista Revolucionario, Unidad Nacional are some of the most notable political parties. Although different political parties existed during the government of Evo Morales, their participation in politics was difficult, as their possibility of obtaining greater representation.
The Republic of Cuba is one of the world's last remaining socialist countries, following the Marxist-Leninist ideology. This has been like this since the relations between the Castros and the Soviet Union after the triumph of the Cuban Revolution, the 1st of January of 1959. It is important to note that from the beginning, Fidel Castro was not a socialist. He was not either a capitalist, but he was considered a humanist. Nowadays, the first secretary of the Communist Party is Fidel's brother, Raúl Castro, that has the most power, and the president of the country is Miguel Díaz-Canel. According to the Freedom House, Cuba is considered an authoritarian regime. According to separation of powers, the executive power is held by the Communist Party, with Raúl Castro at the head, and having Miguel Díaz-Canel as the president of the nation, that follows the rules of the party. Cuba's national legislature, the National Assembly of People's Power, is the supreme organ of power. The People's Supreme Court serves as Cuba's highest judicial branch of government. Cuba is a one-party system. No political party is permitted to nominate candidates of campaigns on the island, apart from the Communist Party.
Type of government, according to Pippa-Norris theory, can be defined as a unitary presidential system in which the president is head of state and head of the army, as I said before, on a multi-party system. He also leads a cabinet with further executive power. The president of Ecuador as of today is Lenin Moreno, pictured to the left. Presidents serve 4-year terms and may be re-elected immediately after their first term had ended. Ecuador also manifests itself internationally as a constitutional republic. In terms of separation of powers, the executive power is led by the president of the government and along with the cabinet to a lesser extent. The legislative power is not only limited to the main legislative body, which is the National Assembly. This is because, to a lesser degree, it can be exercised by the executive, which, as I said before, consists of the president and also the executive cabinet. The judiciary branch of the government is the National Court of Justice, and it is the maximum tribunal and the supreme judicial power of Ecuador, which with competence throughout the whole country. As said before, it is a multi-party system, and today the left-leaning party of the país is still in power after more than a decade.
So, according to Article 43 of the Peruvian Constitution, the Republic of Peru is democratic, social, independent, and sovereign. The state is one and indivisible. The government is unitary, representative, and decentralized, and is organized according to the principles of separation of powers. As we can see, Peru is a unitary semi-presidential republic, which means the president is the head of state and government. He appoints the prime minister and the council of ministers. serves a 5-year term and may not be immediately reelected, is currently Martín Vizcarra from the party Peruanos por el Cambio. And it's a fun fact, he replaced Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, who resigned because of a corruption scandal related to Odebrecht, which was a Latin America case. And the separation of power is divided between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. As we can see, the executive is conformed by the president and the government. The legislative is conformed by the government and the Congress. And the judiciary is independent from both the powers mentioned before. Peru is a pluriform multi-party system. There's many parties, and in 2019, the GNE, or Jurado Nacional de Elecciones, has officially registered 24 parties to date. And some of the most important are Acción Popular, Alianza para el Progreso, Avanza País, Democracia Directa, Frente Amplio, y Fuerza Popular. Now we're going to be talking about authoritarianism versus democracy.
In terms of authoritarianism versus democracy between Bolivia and Cuba, we can see that even though Bolivia is considered partly free by the Freedom House, it is positioned as a partial authoritarian regime in the practice. We can see the relation between both countries in features such as the several cases of violation of citizen rights, even though in Bolivia they are actually supposed to have them, and in Cuba they don't even think about them. Also, we can see that in Bolivia there is an existence of fraudulent electoral laws, and we can observe how it is approximating to the Cuban outlaws of political pluralism. Another common issue is the high levels of corruption in both countries, and the restrictions of basic civil rights, such as the lack of freedom of the press. In conclusion, even though Bolivia's constitution protects the rights and liberties of their citizens, we can see how it is getting closer to the high Cuban restrictions and lack of democratization in the practice.
In terms of authoritarianism versus democracy, we can see that both Ecuador and Peru hold a democratic system. Similarly, they both have democratic institutions. They have the respected National Board of Elections, the CNE in Ecuador, and the JNE in Peru. This guarantees in both a certain extent of transparency, although Ecuador's CNE has been internationally judged in terms of their transparency. There's in both countries a peaceful transfer of powers, in Peru especially among constitutional crises, and importantly in Peru there's huge women's representation in Congress abiding for equality in the country. Although also present in Ecuador is not one of its main democratic features, however, concrete steps have been made to fight corruption. Ecuador has been characterized as a very corrupt country, and recently Ecuador's ex-president Rafael Correa has been sentenced to 8 years in prison due to his involvement in the Odebrecht scandal, further proving Ecuador has high-profile corruption. However, recently, under Moreno's presidency, concrete steps to fight corruption have been made. Also, encouragement on free press, further adding to a democratic style of government, as discussed in some of Pipa Norris's text, and they have strengthened democratic governments. However, both countries face issues that threaten their democratic status. Both, for example, face high-profile corruption. The issue of Ecuador, as I mentioned before, they both face Ecuador faces free fair elections. The elections that took place most recently was highly accused of corruption. In Peru, there's a lack of representation of indigenous peoples, not guaranteeing democratic values for all of its population. There's partisan polarization and unregulated campaign financing. In Ecuador, similarly, there's a lack of rule of law, unregulated campaign financing, similar to Peru. There's partial evidence of cheating in elections and impartial implementation of laws. So although both countries are democratic, they face issues that threaten their democratic status.
Now we'll be describing the quality of democracy according to the Freedom House Democracy Index of Freedom in the World in 2019. So the quality of democracy between Bolivia and Cuba is very different. Bolivia has a 63 over 100, while Cuba has 14 over 100. Bolivia is considered partially free, making its political rights a 25 over 40 and its civil liberties a 38 over 60. Compared to last year's status, it's a 67 over 100. Bolivia has decreased its quality of democracy. And now going on to Cuba, it's not free, of course. Its political rights are almost done, 1 over 40, and civil liberties are 13 over 60, which is just tragic. As you can see, its status has not changed since last year, and it will not change based on our analysis.
According to the Freedom House Index, Ecuador rates a 65 over 100 rating in terms of quality of democracy. This means that Ecuador is defined as a partly free country. Specifically, its political rights rate a 25 over 40 and its civil liberties a 38 over 60. Although Ecuador's numbers have grown in recent years, there's a long way to overcome and become a free country such as Peru. Peru rates a 73 over 100 and is defined as a free country by the Freedom House Index. They have a political rights index of 31 over 40 and a civil liberties index of 42 over 60.
So now I'm going to make a brief conclusion on the analysis we've made before, according to the different standards we have used to analyze this country's political system. And first, as you can see, there's type of government. Bolivia is a unitary social plurinational state. Ecuador is a unitary presidential representative democratic republic. Cuba is a unitary Marxist-Leninist one-party socialist republic. Peru is a unitary semi-presidential representative democratic republic. And as you can see, Ecuador and Peru are the most similar to each other, whilst Cuba is the most different amongst the four of them. And we're going to see it play out in the next standard, which is democracy versus authoritarianism. Cuba and Bolivia are more in the authoritarian centralized quadrant, whilst Peru and Ecuador are more on the democratic centralized quadrant. And this is interesting as we see how the different types of political systems can play out in this. And lastly, I'm going to mention quality of democracy. As you can see here in the graph, the best quality is Peruvian, and then we have Ecuador, followed by Bolivia, and lastly Cuba, which is a place where there's basically no democracy whatsoever. And yeah, so this is the end of our presentation. Here's our sources if you want to consult them. And thank you very much. We're open to any questions you have.